faster. Living off borrowed time. The clock faster. Living off borrowed time. The clock tick faster. Living off borrowed time. The clock tick 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 tick. The clock tick 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 faster. Living off borrowed time. The clock 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 tick faster.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's Living Off Borrowed Time podcast. I am your host, Patrique on RYM, joined as always by my co-host, Caleb, OptimalAudio on RYM, joined this week by a special guest who's been on a few episodes. I don't know how many of them were published or publishable, but Horserenoir on RYM, resident Brockhampton expert, here to talk about Brockhampton and hip-hop's premier boy band, hip-hop's only, not only boy band, because, you know, Did he ever put together like an actual boy band? Were they hip?
I mean, like you have BTS and stuff, and they have rappers in there, so I guess you can consider that.
Poke in like rap elements and like actually you can consider like every New Jack Swing group to have like an R&B boy band.
Yeah.
Or
that was
like,
Hot Boys, the first.
Hot Boys, the best rap boy band right there. Actually, everybody go listen to those two classic Hot Boys albums. Anyway.
Yeah, I really actually just thought of that now. Completely underestimated the influence of Boyz II Men on Brockhampton. The vocal melodies.
I mean,
New Jack Swing, like no. I mean,
there's definitely a lot of '90s R&B like boy band influence on their stuff.
Like when they say boy band stuff, I generally start thinking about it like late '90s boy band, like, and it's like tongue-in-cheek stuff. But they also definitely do like the harmonies. They definitely have like cover a lot of the sort of thematic ground. So, and like a lot of Kevin singing stuff and the Bareface singing balladry stuff definitely covers that. But I mean, I feel like you can go back even further a little bit. I don't know. It's a different approach. We'll get to it. Just really quick, since I know everybody listens to this for the part where I talk about Charles Hamilton. I'm putting it on hiatus again for another week because I only got to listen to 3/4 of one Charles Hamilton mixtape, and I don't want to unfairly assess it, but I promised you 3, so next week I'll give you 4. This might just keep backing up until I do an entire Charles Hamilton episode, which will get negative views. But I'm just putting that out there for everybody.
But it will get all of the Chaos Emeralds.
It will. The amount of Chaos Emeralds in that episode will be obscene. But that next episode, we will step back into the Green Hill Zone. I've listened to 3/4 of one, which was quite good from 2007, except for the fact that it has a bunch of weed carriers on it. But I didn't finish it. Didn't think it would be fair to assign Chaos Emerald. Chaos Emeralds are very serious. You don't just assign Chaos Emeralds to a mixtape you haven't finished listening to.
It's really serious business. It really is. Like can you imagine if the Sonic, community gave Chaos Emeralds out before they finished like their game of Sonic Rivals? Like, I don't know.
I know the Sonic community has never tolerated like poor product being rushed to market, so
no, never ever.
So moving on to Brockhampton, another group that has never rushed anything to market, and that was one of our better transitions. That was kind of a reach. I don't know.
A little bit.
But Horse is the expert here. I think I was probably out of us the last one to get on the Brockhampton train.
I remember liking Saturation 1, and we'll get to it, but not falling for it like a lot of the internet did at the time. But I think I might have beat you by like a very short margin. Because I think once you got on the train, you were like front row Brockhampton. Like I remember our 2017 episodes where you were super, super high on them. And I was really high on them too.
Oh, yeah. Because 3 had just dropped, and I remember I got into them because I got into 2 about like a few weeks after it dropped. I had no expectations. I was going into it expecting to be unimpressed, and I was floored by it. And I listened to it for like 2 months straight, and I was floored by 3. And then we'll get to everything when we get to it, but definitely I was a little bit of a latecomer, and I had to go backwards to 1 and backwards to all the other stuff. But we should start the story at the beginning, and of course you can take it away from there.
Okay, so I go way back with Brockhampton. I guess you could consider me an OG fan, because the way that I first found out about Brockhampton was Kevin Abstract. At the time, he had released his first album. It's called MTV 1987. And so I knew about this, and then I think a couple months after that, he had put up a website or something, and he said that I have a new band called Brockhampton, and this is the first song. And so that's basically how I found out about them. Now, like, they released a couple tracks from there that I tracks just as standalone singles that I liked. And then they also released in 2016 their debut mixtape, All American Trash. But I would say the release where I actually became like a fan of Brockhampton instead of somebody who just vaguely knew about them was Saturation, like pretty much everyone else.
I think it's sorry.
Oh, no, you can go.
I just wanted to cut you off really quick. I think it's important to go over all the members of Brockhampton as listed on RYM, make sure we have everything. Because this group, it's a boy, they consider themselves a boy band, and I think it's important to chronicle everybody who's in the boy band. Because normally a boy band has about like 4 or 5 members. So we have Kevin Abstract, Dom McLennan, Merlin Wood, Matt Champion, Joba, Bareface, Ramil Hamani, Jabari Manwa, Kirk O'Murley, Henlock Salashi, Ashlyn Gray, Robert Ontiant, John Nunez, Ameer Van, Rodney Tenner, Albert Gordon, Franklin Mendez, Grayson Glenn Carter, Anish Ochani, Kevin Doan, and I feel like they're missing some people too.
I mean, yeah, I'm sure there's like a bunch of other people, kind of like how Odd Future had members that were basically like weed carriers around the store, but weren't like musical members.
Now,
this would ultimately hurt Brockhampton when they had to split that epic record deal up 15 ways, which was the more ill-conceived record deals that a major group has had in a while.
Yeah,
even
and it's worth and it's worth noting around this initial mixtape, there were 2 members, Rodney Tenner and Albert Gordon, who ultimately were not around for the rest of the band's run. I think Rodney Tenner had fucked Matt's girlfriend and got kicked out, and that's who Matt was talking about in the song Heat. And Albert Gordon was a producer who just left because he didn't want to pursue a career in music, I guess. And so it's kind of weird hearing some of those early songs, like, and hearing those other members in it. That I haven't heard the All American Trash mixtape in a while, but I remember kind of feeling like it wasn't as good as the original singles, and like the band was still kind of trying to find their sound.
I listened to it fresh for this for homework for the podcast, and I enjoyed it I enjoyed it about as much as I remember. I had it as a 7. They're definitely still feeling up the formula. It kind of feels to me a lot like Ameer surrounded by a bunch of kind of unmemorable weak area performances that are still charming in their way. The songs are a bit like unfinished snippets. I will say that Poison near the end sounds like no other Brockhampton song would, for almost until a song near the end of Ginger that I really like, and maybe one of the songs on Saturation Drafts. It's got like a real like sort of long drawn out 70s guitar vamp thing to it. Like, I almost want to call it spaghetti western, but it's a sample flip that I really hadn't heard them use before, like around this period at all. And Ameer going over it sounds really cool. Flipmo was like early mid 2000s Southern beat over about flip phones, which I think is pretty funny. And there's like charming stuff on here. The way Ameer, it's like, it mostly feels like an Ameer showcase with some Kevin stuff, some Dom stuff. It feels formative. They're still working out the formula. There's nothing bad on here. It's something you come back to after you're a fan, but I don't think it would necessarily make a new listener a fan if you're going chronologically. I should have listened to the singles as opposed to this, because I forgot that they had a bunch of singles that weren't on Saturation that really got them buzz. And I'm kind of interested to hear how the buzz spread too, since you said you were on the ground floor.
Like, yeah.
So like an arm, yeah. or and elsewhere, and like did Fantano pick this up, or like how was
yes, there was so
how did saturation?
So I can go through that period. So I guess to get a little bit personal, I have a weird kind of personal connection. So I think 2013 was my last year of high school, and I went to the Woodlands High in Texas, which coincidentally, I think Kevin Abstract was a junior at the time I was there, along with Matt and I think Ameer. So it was a big school. I didn't even know they attended until like a year after. But I thought that was pretty cool. And then the year after that, I was in UT Austin, which I think is when Merlin was attending. So that's kind of like part of like how I knew about them that early, was that I just knew that there were these kids that went to my high school that were making music.
Mm-hmm.
So that ended up being a weird coincidence.
Right.
I was kind of thinking more about how like when they got momentum on like around the time of Saturation though, like I mean like
yeah. So around Saturation, I know that they had been building up steam like on Reddit and KTT, because that's mostly where people were hearing about them.
How did they meet the other members? Question, because they met them on KTT, right? Like how did like the other three the others? Like that's what I wanted to ask you too.
So
over KTT.
So a bunch of them knew each other already in real life, like Matt, Kevin, and Ameer. And then a bunch of the other members, like Dom and Bareface, they were outside of that circle of friends in Texas, and they found each other on KTT. But like a bunch of them already knew each other at that point, which I think is why they took off, partly why they took off, and a lot of those other like meet through the internet groups didn't really, is that they were already serious about music and already knew each other in real life prior to this point.
Well, what's interesting about it is they don't come, like, if I didn't know they met through the internet aspect of their music, I would have never thought that, having listened to Saturation 2 for the first heard them. It doesn't feel that way listening to the music. It feels completely like these dudes. It doesn't even feel like they were assembling stuff by click and drag at all. If there were parts
at this point, like they were living together in the same house.
Oh yeah, that was all. The Saturation sessions were all over the same period where they were all in a house together, right? And didn't they have that show on Vice? They referenced that show on Vice.
Yeah.
Like didn't they film a documentary?
Yeah, like pretty much very early on, because a lot of the members knew each other in real life. I'd say like around the mixtape, All American Trash. At this point, they were all living together in a house in San Marcos, which is where Texas State is. I think that's where Joba was going to school. And so, yeah, so pretty much they were already like living in the same house recording music at this point. So they kind of had a lot of chemistry in real life compared to a lot of the copycat groups that would try to start stuff after this.
Oh, they were accused of being Odd Future copycats, which is... I mean,
they're definitely a post-Odd Future group. Like, I don't think they would exist without Bastard. No, but I think they definitely took their own spin on those ideas.
I mean, I feel like they're taking influences from all over the place. Like, I don't think it's a direct
I think the main thing that they took from Odd Future is just, I guess, the marketing strategy, just the DIY aesthetic, basically the important parts,
right?
That resulted in Odd Future's success.
Right, saturate the market, saturation,
like the visuals, just all of that.
Right, the kind of cult of personality, the live shows, they pretty much had that momentum going right up through the end of the trilogy, and then we'll get to it. But I mean, so I guess we're just gonna kind of gloss over All American Trash and get right to Saturation 1, which hard for me to view without looking at it through the prism of... That's a really pretentious way to put that. It's like a fucking certain RWAM reviewers... Never mind. Saturation 1, which it's hard for me to view without thinking of Saturation 2 first, because I heard it afterwards. Whereas I think it's definitely best listened to at the trilogy in sequence, because it is an evolution. And this is a really good album, but it feels like a first step. Although there are some of their best songs on here. And as generally would be the case on their albums, they're on the second half. Like, they start hot, then they have like a little period where it's like consistent but not great, and you'll have everybody will have their favorite songs among those consistent and not great. And then around track 10, it has like a big turning point for the final third where it gets really strong. And I think Cash and Milk are true. Cash, Milk, and Face are three of their best songs. And Waste is really good closing credits music.
So Saturation 1 is... I'm going to say that Saturation 1 is a bit underrated. I know that people like saying that the third one is the best. I actually think this is the second best, because I feel like out of all three, this is the one that I think flows the best as a single standalone project, which at the time people thought that it was. Like, no one knew there was going to be two more in the same year.
Right.
And so, yeah, this is basically where their popularity blew up, mostly because of the Fantano effect.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I came to this during the height of the hype, and I was like, damn, like, what is the hype about? I think it was like the day after it dropped, I heard it, and it already had like a bunch of ratings, and I was like, well, who the fuck are these guys? Like, I hadn't heard anything prior at this point. And I was like, I heard the first two songs, and I was like, oh, these are great. And then I heard the rest, and I was like, okay, the rest of this is good. And then it got to Milk, and I was like, okay, this is great. And I was just like, I don't know, I think this is a good album, but I listened to about half of it today, like in like preparation for this, and I'm just like, it still doesn't hit me like 2 and 3 did at the time, and even like do now. I don't get that same sense of like, not nostalgia, but just like, oh, remember when this dropped, like that sort of thing. I really get that sense of like feeling with 2 and 3 versus 1. I'm like, oh yeah, this was a good album. But it doesn't like really hit me.
Like, I get that nostalgic feeling specifically from 1 and 2, especially because I managed to see them on their first ever tour, which came out, I think, like a little bit before 2 dropped, but like the singles had already dropped, and so this was, in my opinion, their peak. Just in terms of hype, in terms of chemistry, in terms of like quality, just everything was just full blast. And
well, this was definitely hyped. I mean, this, like, for a group that like had a little bit of hype prior to, and then it seemed like everybody knew them, and they really had like, I mean, they weren't like mainstream, but they were pretty well known. Like their videos did good numbers on YouTube for a band that was pretty new. So it was kind of cool to see like how they became. I thought they were just, I mean, I guess this is later on, but I thought they were just going to be like a poster. They were going to turn into like a poster child band for like the second half of the 2010s, like in the internet age. So, because that's really what, like, they really feel like a mid to late 2010s, like music because the internet. You know what I mean? Not the Gambino album that I just name dropped. Yeah.
Cool that you brought that up, though, because there was a point I wanted to bring up about their music versus Gambino's music, because I feel like they kind of do the same stuff that Gambino tried to do, at least earlier on, before he decided that it would be better off for him to try and just outright ape better artists, previous artists, which he was still doing previously, but in terms of themes and stuff, and what, like, the image he was trying to do, the art student sort of thing, and, like, who he was trying to appeal to, in terms of the cross-section of a crowd on Camp, mostly, I'm thinking here.
Yeah.
And like they kind of touch on that and try and get at the same emotions, but in a way that feels a lot more genuine because they were actually teenagers and they were actually I feel like it just feels a lot more deeply felt and much more better articulately expressed and not cynical. Whereas Camp is one of the most cynical albums I've ever heard. Like that album. Ugh. God, it's so funny.
I mean, I'd argue that really, like, the only worthwhile Gambino project is Because the Internet, because it's the only Gambino project where it feels like he's actually, like, coming up with a distinct sound instead of aping other artists. Like, I think his recent stuff is super overrated.
Yeah, I think
mediocre R&B to mediocre funk to mediocre souls. Just listen to Frank Ocean.
Or really. Listen to the Yves Tumor album this year, like I was saying in our like mid-year, like the Gambino album, or the the Eve's album just felt like a better version of the Gambino record this year. Like, it was quote unquote like artful or whatever, but it was also like rooted in funk and like, you know, psychedelic soul and stuff like that. And it like grooved way harder than that Gambino album anyway.
God, who even remembers that Gambino album even came out this year?
There's a lot of great.
Like, what a wet fart of an album.
It was weird. I think that was probably one of the only good Fantana reviews this year was of that album, because he took it down a peg, and it was actually a well thought out takedown.
Yeah, he can do it sometimes when he feels like, when something inspires him. Like, I don't know. I don't want to talk about Fantano too much. He doesn't talk about us very much, so I don't want to do him any
He doesn't.
Yeah. So
in terms of in terms of like the Gambino comparison though, like he always tried to have this balance where he would do something like, he put out a Gangsta Grills, but he also put out songs about how he wanted to go outside from his room because he was playing with his fucking action figures, or I don't know. But then he also does songs about like fucking like sex jams and shit. Like his balance was all weird, and it was just appallingly cynical and calculated. But with Brockhampton's balance, like they did, first of all, they were able to achieve it because they have multiple people to handle it. Like Ameer is the center in terms of like hard lyricism, but you have Kevin for like the emotional impact, and Dom is kind of like an everyman sort of presence, and he can really rap his ass off, which I didn't appreciate Dom so much at first, because with Kevin and Ameer in the spotlight, you know, Joba and Merlin, when they show up, more Joba than Merlin, although Merlin has some standout verses. You have all these outsized personalities. You don't realize that Dom kills pretty much every verse.
Dom is basically the most traditional of the rappers in Brockhampton. Mm-hmm. And then you also have Matt Champion, who, like, really going over Brockhampton's discography, I found myself really impressed with how Matt kind of went from being the worst rapper in the group to being, I think, one of the best rappers.
I think that's definitely a testament to how good Kevin is at utilizing the deep roster and placing them on the albums. Like, obviously the Bareface appearances are very well positioned, but like I don't think I could ever listen to a whole album of Matt Champion. But the way Matt Champion's used on the, and he does progress as a rapper too. You can hear the progression. He definitely
clothes just get tighter. He sounds more confident.
Which one is it? It's on 2 or 3. The "Respect That Women Boy" verse.
That was on Junkie. It's on Junkie. Yeah,
that's an amazing verse. I love that.
That's his best.
I think that was the first verse where like I really like, oh shit, this guy like might actually be one of the best in the group.
And that's on a song where everybody absolutely kills it.
I think that's their best song.
It's their best. It's the best song. I have a favorite, but I wouldn't argue. Junkie's like top 2 or 3.
Yeah, Junkie is in my absolute top 5, probably top 3. It's not my favorite. I probably gave away my favorite. If you've been reading my log all day, I've been kind of chronicling, going through all the Brockhampton shit. But my favorite is, we'll get to it. But yeah, Saturation 1, Milk's my favorite song on Saturation 1.
Yeah, I think it's definitely one of their 3 best.
Yeah, I think my favorite on Saturation 1 would it's tough. I want to say maybe like Star, like one of the first couple tracks on there, which is like, it's kind of a front-loaded album. They have so many of their biggest singles just right up front.
I really like I like Boys a lot. You can take that out of context and make it rock.
It sounds like the Charlie XCX song. You've been thinking about Boys.
No, that is one of Ameer's best performances on here for sure. That was one of the first that really grabbed me on the album. And yeah, Cash is great too. I don't know. I feel like this is like 4 or 5 really standout songs, and a bunch of songs that I like in the context of the album that I would never reach for outside of the album. Whereas 2 and 3, there's like most of the songs are songs I can just I can think of at any given moment, and then I would want to play the whole album. Like, I was really struck by how when I came to these, they felt as fresh as they did when I was super hype on them in 2017. Like, it didn't really feel like they'd aged a day. Whereas this
like,
one,
I thought maybe maybe it's just hype. Like I was just caught up in the moment, but no. I think that year they were truly just on a creative hot streak. Like even their shelved demos sound good.
right? And I mean, I wish I'd gotten a chance to listen to more of them too, because the demos and the drafts, like their different takes on things. It was just really a incredibly fruitful period. They were really good at rolling it all out, like. And their aesthetic was like the Billy Starr movie, which came with 3. That was really cool. The way they rolled that out, everything about it.
Just all the constant videos, like how they would drop tracks that wouldn't even be on the album.
Yeah, and that I guess that goes into my point. Was like, I think they were coming too quick with them. Like I don't think so, because we'll get more into it later. But I feel like what they could have released after, I think, could have been just as good.
Yeah, I feel like there's every indication that they really could have kept the momentum. Well, I don't know. I feel like there's so many stories. I feel like there's a book. There's definitely a book somebody's writing, and it's probably going to come out in a bunch of fucking Instagram stories.
It's going to be like just a collection of Reddit and KTT posts.
Yeah, and that's fitting, because that's the fan base for these. I mean, not all of it, but that's like organically the fan base.
But yeah, I feel like, honestly, I'm glad that they released 3 albums in the same year, because that hot streak they were on, they were just releasing so much great material, and like nobody knew at the time that like the circumstances allowing for that creative hot streak were going to be as temporary as it was. So I'm glad they got as much material recorded as possible. Like they probably have like at least like 3 albums worth of stuff that just never got released and probably never will.
I mean, they literally saturated the market per the name. Like it was.
And I think that's a big reason why they just grew so much
right
in such a short amount of time, was they were just dropping so much material, and so much of it was just so high quality. Nobody was doing that.
When 2 dropped, it felt like a bigger moment than the first one. Like it actually felt like more people than just internet nerds knew who these guys were. Like,
yeah, because now like saturation was already popular, and now suddenly they were back with another album that was suddenly even better than the first one. Like nobody does that.
Right.
Well, I felt like I couldn't ignore them anymore. I didn't even know who the fuck they were. Like their name, I didn't know if they were an indie rock group. I just knew that they were like on the charts, and people were mentioning them, and people were getting mad. They weren't like the too much not metal on the charts. People were coming out about them, and so I felt like I owed them a shot, and I was hooked from the very beginning of this. Like the way that intro comes in and the flow, like it's so.
Yeah, it's hard not to be hooked by Gummy.
Yeah. Like Gummy, yeah.
That's
Gummy,
top 5. That's top 5.
Saturation 2 is just banger after banger. It's just non-stop hits.
I really feel like this is the album where, I mean, they came together on KTT. This is the album where I most hear like the whole Kanye influence in terms of just constructing an album like front to back of just like nothing but hits, like a big curtain raising intro, a beautiful closing credits outro. It just feels like constructed in that sort of airtight way that like a Late Registration was, and produced in a way that's like a very much a summer album. Like I don't know, like I feel like the first one was them getting their legs, and the third one feels like a refinement of this with taking some chances, both lyrically and production-wise. But this one feels like the absolute peak to me.
Yeah, and also, like, at this point, they had moved to LA, and you can really start hearing the West Coast influence of what they were doing.
Oh,
like, there's a lot of, like, G-Funk influence here.
There's so many G-Funk bass lines on this. Like, I feel like the middle part of the album is full of just, like, straight-up trunk music that, the bass line, like, there are songs on here that people I don't think talk about so much. First of all, people don't like Jello, apparently. Fuck off.
What?
Like, Jello,
I was
looking at like the comment box. I've been looking at a lot of comment boxes today, and I really bad habits. But yeah, Jello, apparently people don't like. Come on. People apparently don't like Jello, and people don't like, what was the other one? I don't want to say Gamba. If you don't like Gamba, like, whatever.
Sunny? Is it Sunny?
I thought it was it Sunny or Summer? It was very similar title.
Everyone likes Summer. Everyone loves Summer.
Everyone loves Summer. Okay, right, and that's a great song. Yeah.
Summer is up there with like that is Bareface's Frank Ocean moment. I would say. Like, if you can compare pretty much anyone except Ameer and Odd Future to Frank Ocean at any given moment. And that would be the one I could say is closest to, like, something off of Blonde, or it's such a gorgeous, just, it feels like evocative of nothing summer. It feels like when
they listen to Channel Orange a bunch of times. Like, for that, like, that song, it feels like direct, like, or like the internet, like Channel Orange, or like the internet, like Ego Death. It feels like that to me.
Yeah, I could see this being like a companion piece to Ego Death a little bit. And at least the slower balladier songs on here have that quality to them.
Yeah.
And there's like a perfect balance between it too. Like, you've got I guess the first album and the earlier stuff, I did not know they'd moved to LA at this point. That makes a lot of sense, because it feels like there's progression from just being straight up like Texas Southern in terms of the banger stuff to like a more G-Funk influence in the production. And I think the third is the best production-wise, if it's like a purely production level, because there's some stuff on there. I'm thinking mainly the first track, Johnny, I think it is, the one with the saxophone, the first single, and Sister Nation, which I cannot gush enough about, and the very last track, the one, the Team, which was the Bareface Ebony song. Those are probably my three favorite production things they've ever done, not counting some stuff on the drafts that never made it anywhere. But in terms of the way, like, overall, the whole package, like, the lyrics, like, everyone lyrically on this, everybody on Junkie is their fucking Daytona 500, they're oldie, they're immortal, like, that's the song they're going to be remembered for.
Yeah, I feel, and especially for me, that's probably my favorite of theirs. Like, I think Kevin's first verse on that is the best verse he's ever done and ever will do. Like, I guess just speaking as a gay guy who listens to hip hop, like, hearing that kind of fire, like, on a verse, like, at that point, like, I had never expected to hear that. So for me, on a personal level, that meant a lot to me.
Yeah, and it's such an impassioned, like, performance. Like, it's just so powerful without telling you that it's powerful. Like, it doesn't need to, because you just listen to the verse, you know? And then I think the beat comes in, like, yeah.
And I think in general, Saturation 2 is just a more aggressive and confident album than the first one.
Yep. Yeah. I actually think this is the Brockhampton, the Saturation 2 and, like, 3 reviews, I think, are Dead End Hip Hop does not get it right a lot of times, but I think they actually were, like, their Saturation 2 review was really good, and then they were talking about, like, the fact that, like, the production and the fact that it was, like, a harder album than the first one. Really,
like, the first one kind of felt like just kids making music and having fun. The second one feels like they're making music and having fun, but now they know, like, they're actually really good at this, and they're just trying to see how far they can go.
I mean, Queer is also a top 10 Brockhampton song as well. That hook is nuts. I love that song.
The hook, like, that's the thing, is, like, aside from, like, it's impossible for me to pick a favorite element to this, but the hooks are what stick with you at first, and then you come back and you realize these are great verses. Like, back to back, over and over, great verses from all of them. Like, all three of the main guys, Matt, when he shows up on Junkie, you've got some great Merlin moments on here. Everybody has a distinct personality. No one runs together with each other. It's perfectly sequenced. It's just under 50 minutes. You can play it, like, back to back and not get sick of it. Rides in the car. It came out at the end of summer, but so it felt like it was extending summer a little bit. And, with the way the weather is, summer basically goes on until November anyway. So it was still perfect for the weather. And
yeah, it feels like a late summer nights kind of album sometimes. Like, the hard stuff, like, in the daytime, but then as the album kind of goes on, it has that, like, 7 p.m. in August feeling,
Yeah, it gives me the same kind of feeling as both Flower Boy and Blonde in terms of just being, like, the very last day of summer.
I mean, I get that feeling more out of Channel Orange. Well, I mean, I actually feel like Channel Orange might be the beginning.
Channel Orange is the beginning of summer.
Yes, Channel Orange is the beginning of summer, Blonde is the end of summer. Yes.
Yeah. Well, Blonde is also I think, a really great autumn and winter album. It's really every season because there are tracks on there that sound like every season, which is a really unquantifiable thing to describe music, but
Blonde is literally appropriate for every moment. Blonde literally encapsulates all 365 days of the year.
Yeah. Channel Orange is like its best in like May to September.
Yeah. I can't say enough good about Saturation 2. It's their peak. It makes it so no matter how much they fall off, whether or not that's an accurate term for what they did. They definitely fell off from where they were here. I don't know if they've fallen off entirely because doing homework for this episode made me reconsider my initial stance on that. But this album alone made me, I won't say fan for life, but somebody who always checked for it because they were able to produce this. This is what got me into them. This is what made me check their entire back catalog, even the obscure solo shit that we're not really going to cover. Although, briefly, I would like to say, if you are a fan of the group, Kevin Abstract's American Boyfriend is a really interesting concept album that it's probably more ambitious than it is good, but it's well done. It also seems like something that Childish Gambino would do, but way better than that. It's like very English student-y / theater student-y. Speaking as someone who was an English major, I'm qualified to make that criticism. But it's like somewhere between Gambino and Frank Ocean, not nearly as insufferable as Gambino, nor nearly as good as Frank, but well thought out, well intentioned, and there are some jams on there. Like, Kevin's always been talented, but he never really truly found his footing until, I would say, Saturation 1. Like, the solo stuff is, like, interesting more than it is good, from what I remember, and I never really revisited it much. But out of all of it, I would say American Boyfriend is probably the one if you, like, really get into Brockhampton. Just to touch on it, just because I said I would. So.
Okay, yeah, I think it's solid, like, Frank Ocean cosplay, and I don't mean that in like the usual like dismissive critique. Like, I just think it's obvious that he really likes Frank and he really likes, like, you know, just that lyrically and what like Frank is so specific. Like, he's a very hard artist to rip off, actually, even though a lot of people have tried.
Drake did a pretty good job ripping him off on that one song with Future.
Well, but the problem was Drake on that song, the lyrics were a lot more possessive and strange than a Frank Ocean song.
That is true. Like, he still couldn't help not writing like Drake on the song, but like,
he sounded. But then he also let Future go in for like 2 minutes in the song. I'm like, this is not a Frank Ocean song anymore. Now it just sounds like Future. It just sounds like it was a weird.
It was a song of baffling choices, man. I don't hate the song. It was just a weird choice. And now he put out that Sleeping Pill song that he just put out. You know what I'm surprised that didn't blow up was the one he did with Khaled where he said he's not a doctor, he's a pop star. I was like, people are going to meme the shit out of that. This is dumb.
That one definitely, I think, was the one that was supposed to blow up, and I don't think it did. I mean, like, it's charting, but yeah, of course. But I don't think it's like, it hasn't gone Drake level, you know? Which is, I guess, people thought it was mid, which it is.
Was. Yeah. It is.
And the other one was terrible. So.
Oh, the other one.
Oh yeah, that's the one like where he pitches his voice up to sound like Abel. Like, he sounds like The Weekday on that track.
Oh, it's. I don't even. Everybody said Weekend on that, and I was like, to me, it doesn't sound like Weekend. He sounds like, I can't even place what it is, but it's like, it's really weird. Like, it's.
No, it's definitely like he's definitely doing Weekend cosplay.
I don't know. I think it sounds way too different to be. I mean, as in, it's bad. It's that bad Weekend cosplay, I guess.
Like, I actually like it more than the Pop Star track because, like, it's a bad song, but it's kind of bad in a way that's fascinating. Like, usually when Drake is bad, it's just like a boring kind of bad that I have no patience for.
Yeah,
I get way more enjoyment out of like I'm Upset than a song like that. Like, that song genuinely rips and is funny, and like a song like
rips. I would say it's hilarious.
It's hilarious. I'm being like facetious. Yeah.
The line that got a lot of blood and it's cold, especially the way he delivers it.
You got a lot of blood.
I think I'm Upset is funny, but only in the context of specifically when it dropped.
That makes it even funny. No,
that's the thing, because
it's funny no matter what, but it's hilarious in the context of when it dropped.
And like, yeah, like he dropped it like immediately after Duffy, because like it almost felt like it's like, yeah, like he's so confident, like I just showed him, I'm going to drop this.
It was supposed to be the single that he was going to drop on that day, I think. And then Infrared came out, and he was like, all right, I'm just going to drop this dubby track. And then he dropped I'm Upset. He was like, all right, back to my original single. Like, he tweeted that or something. He put on Instagram.
And, like, I just find that funny that, like, he thought that this was the single.
It was not it.
The song is called I'm Upset.
Oh, I'm Upset. Which
look, pouting, I'm upset.
Which is the most, like, Drake knew what he was doing. That is the most Drake sentiment, like, ever. Like, what do you mean? The song is, like you said, it's just called I'm Upset. And especially when you see it in the context of the Scorpion album cover, when you put that face with the I'm Upset title,
I'm upset. He's pouting.
Right.
The best part is,
it's beautiful.
Like, when that song dropped, there were some bars about, like, paying child support, and I was like, what is he talking about? And then a couple of days later.
Yeah. It was Audemars came out, like, the next
I just want to picture Pusha T's face when he hears I'm Upset for the first time.
It's like it's like a maniacal, like, Grinch laughter. Like
he's just doing that, like, sinister hand pyramid thing.
Yeah,
it's really the Birdman hand rub. But
yes.
Oh God, what a time! What a time! It's also, I mean, which makes sense because these Brockhampton projects, even though they were the year before, like the whole internet rap wave, at least the whole, like, rap wave in, like, I feel like rap had a specific moment in, like, that you could divide rap in the 2010s up into, like, 3 different sections, and I feel like the third section started in 2017 and, like, went to 2019 really, and now I think we're in, like, a new era. But I think that, like, you can hit major events. Like, I feel like the second phase of rap in the 2010s, like, concluded with the, Life of Pablo, like, Chance stuff or whatever, when that was, like, the hottest thing, and then it changed. So,
well, who would put alongside Brockhampton in that wave?
I think the resurgence of Odd Future, not that they ever went away, but in the sense that, like,
I think there was definitely a dip, like, in the mid-2010s, there was a period where people thought, okay, Odd Future is over, Tyler fell off, Frank's never going to release another album, who knows what Earl is doing. Like, I think there was definitely a period where things were kind of looking bad for Odd Future.
No one gave Sid any respect. Fucking internet was putting
the internet was putting out records, but nobody cared at that point.
Nobody cared except for Reddit hip hop heads nerds or RYM or some of RYM. Not really all of them.
Like, I give, like, Ego Death a fucking 9 and no one cares.
Yeah, I think it's honestly really impressive how much Tyler managed to turn his career around, because I think that Cherry Bomb really could have been a career killer if he didn't follow it up with something.
Yeah, and I think that, like, Flower Boy and then the Earl stuff and Frank, obviously all of that was, like, the perfect storm for them. And then I guess if you wanted to, I mean, I'm thinking of, like, other, seminal moments in rap in the last, like, few years. I think that, like, before a lot of, like, the new, I mean, I guess Brockhampton were coming out and they were, like, in a big, like, internet group, but
I mean, I would definitely consider them to be kind of, like, in the latter half of the 2010s, just because they feel so indebted towards
the earlier 2010 stuff. Yeah. I mean, they kind of they came out
like, it's definitely music from kids who were growing up listening to early 2010s rap in high school.
Mm-hmm. Like, they fucking loved Twisted Fantasy, and they also loved, like, Bastard. Like, it was that kind of thing.
I get that, but I also get, like, maybe on the production end. I mean, like, I obviously get, like, on the second one more than anything, like I said, I feel like I heard a lot of Late Registration through Twisted Fantasy Kanye, but I also hear a lot of, like, their regional influences, too. I mean, like, on Kevin's side and on his solo shit, too, I hear, like, the Frank stuff and Tyler. Like, he was
There's also a lot of Southern influence, especially on these newer tracks they've been dropping. I hear a lot of more overt Southern.
Right.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Stuff.
Like, and I feel Ameer is somewhere between Southern and New York in terms of his approach, I would say. Like, sometimes a lot of the time he does feel like he has a calculated approach that I hadn't really thought about it, but you think, considering where he comes from and, like, the methodical way he structures his lyrics, where they're, like, intelligent but deliberate, a little bit like Bun B.
Yeah, I mean, I think. I never thought of this comparison. I'm trying to think of Ameer as like a comp for him in like the 2000s, and I'm struggling to think of one. I guess your point, though, about him being a hybrid of the South and like more East Coast. I mean, I could see him as I think he reminds me of like kind of like Maryland rappers or Virginia, like that kind of area. I mean, the Clips, but even like Maryland rappers that aren't Logic, thankfully. But like it seems like that DC area, like DMV area, he kind of sounds like someone from there, even though he's not.
Orioles fan.
I wonder if he's an Orioles fan. They're
really
doing.
Thought about it.
Hey, they're doing pretty well. If he likes the Wizards, I feel sorry for him.
I think I came up with the whole. I think I came up. I'm going to abandon that line of thought because what you were saying about him being compared to that area rappers is like interesting because Ameer did get a lot of criticism for rapping about the same shit all the time. I guess they all did. They address it on the third one, which I guess we should move on to 3.
Yeah.
They address it on the third one. It's like, man, they're all talking about the same stuff. The one's gay. The one used to sell drugs and everything.
Right.
But it's like, yeah, Ameer is always talking about how he used to sell drugs and came up and he's trying to go straight. And Kevin always talks about his, being gay and coming out and his struggle. And
right. Just always talking about being gay. It's a really terrible thing. It's just the worst.
I know. You always hear, like, why are all these rap songs talking about that? Like,
right.
Radio and hearing all these rappers talk about being gay all the time. It's getting really fun.
So, yeah, Saturation 3. Now, like, this is probably heresy for a lot of fans, but I actually think it's the weakest of the trilogy. Not because the songs are worse, but just because I feel like it's just a bit too serious. Like, I don't think there's enough bangers. I don't think there's enough fun tracks. It's not necessarily my favorite side of Brockhampton. I get why people like it, because it is probably, like, one of their most adventurous and, I guess, polished releases. But it's the one that I come back to the least, even though I think it has some of their best songs ever.
I do want to say that this is ranked number 424 overall in RYM, which is a big laugh, and I think it's a great album, but that's still a big laugh.
Yeah, I mean their ranking algorithm is terrible.
Yeah.
Real quick, I love all the Saturation albums. They're not nearly what they're ranked entirely too high everywhere on RYM. Fuck, like don't take those seriously. I kind of agree with Horse about it being a little too serious in that. It leads off with Boogie, which I misidentified as Johnny earlier in the podcast with the saxophone, and this was the lead single, and that's definitely a misdirect in that it's got like the biggest bangers right out the gate, which they kind of were. That's kind of the formula that they'd established, the template with the past two. But here, more than anything, it starts off with the most hype tracks, then it kind of goes into the ballads, then at Sister Nation, it becomes way more serious, and it's way more serious in tone and instrumental and theme. Through to the very end, but I think that Sister Nation through Team Run is my favorite thing that they've ever done, and Sister Nation, the best track they've ever done, edging out Junkie.
Sister Nation is, I would say it's definitely one of the best tracks they've ever done, and to me, it's kind of a shame. I guess we'll get into it a little bit later that Iridescence kind of ended up being a flop because I feel like that album was an attempt to make basically a full album of songs like that.
I would agree. It tries to have that same sort of scope, but the thing that works about Sister Nation so well is that
it's just a very tightly written song.
Yes, it's structured like in its place on the album and its construction. It reminds me of what Tyler always does with his track 10s. It's essentially track 10. I mean, there's a skit at track 10, but it's in that place on the album. Tyler always has a 2-part, or it might have been 3 parts on Wolf. I forget. Where it's like a big multi-part suite essentially. That like is the big thematic heart of the album, and that's what they're doing here, and it works perfectly.
And I just really dig the sound of the song. Like they had never done something really that cold and industrial sounding.
Yeah, I think I described the second part of it in my review as like sounding a little bit like a Sega AM2 racing soundtrack or something, where it's like it's got like that sort of 90s arcade.
Like it's kind of got like this synth punk feel to it.
Mm-hmm.
that tempo, and it was very new territory for them, and they sounded great over it. And the way they transitioned into it sounded completely like it just sounded so grand in scope and just real. I can't say enough good stuff. And the fucking verses are just as powerful, although not just as powerful as Junkie, but up there, I would say. Although my favorite verses on the album are probably on Team. I love all the old rap callbacks to like they have the UGK callback on there, and I forgot there was just a callback I just noticed when I was listening to it today. I'm gonna have to look it up on Genius. Which
I mean the title is a callback to Sonic Youth,
right?
I will say, and I guess since Patrick kind of had the floor on Sister Nation, my favorite Brockhampton song is Bleach, and it has been since probably the second I heard it.
That's an incredible song.
It's such a special track. When I heard that song, I always remember the first time I heard it, I was like, still not, I mean, I loved to, but I still wasn't like full on blown over by these guys. When I heard that song, I was like, yeah, these guys have it. And I don't know how long it's going to last, but for right now, these guys are important. And that song is nothing about I would change. The last like 75 seconds are probably some of the best minute and a half of music that came out that year. It's a super, the way like all the backing vocals come in, and then like it's just like the bridge where it's like, you know, trying to figure it out, and then like the backing vocals are in, and then it like ends with the
Ryan Beatty.
Yeah, like that's just, it's really gorgeous, and something that's like you could tell took effort, but also feels strangely effortless at the same time. And I think a lot of great artists, I've said in this pod before, like a lot of great artists like are able to make really impactful songs sound so easy and effortless, at least to me. And that's one of them. And that song to this day, like I listened to it just for fucking kicks like a few hours ago. And it will never not hold up. Like that is definitely my favorite song of theirs. One of my favorite songs of the whole like post Odd Future wave in general. Like it's what the best aspects of like music that's, you know, like what music could be that is blending of like, hey, I really love Kanye, I really love Odd Future, I really love, you know, Southern rap, I really love like, you know, SoundCloud rap, like all this sort of stuff. Like melded into, I really love pop music, I love boy bands, like, you know, just 2000s pop music, like melded into one song, and it's incredible. And that's always been my favorite Brockhampton track.
Yeah, three things. So that was really well put. That was the first thing, really well put. And on the Genius page, Bareface says the falsetto part on Team before the second half was low-key inspired by that part on Teenage Dirtbag by Wheatus, where he sings like a girl, which, if that's true, is fucking amazing. Shout out to Wheatus for Teenage Dirtbag.
Yeah. So Ebony really convinced me like Bareface could rock a total shoegaze album. I don't really care for any of the members in a solo capacity, but Bareface, I think, out of all the members, could probably release the best solo album.
Well, I feel like, I mean, on the shoegaze tip, we could really just listen to him over like some really cloudy production, like, because I mean, cloud rap really is like the modern shoegaze. So also, I guess my point, which I literally just said off the top of my head, makes sense because he has a song with Young Sherman from a long time ago, who was one of the producers for Drain Gang. So actually, I did not expect to throw out that point and then talk myself into it by looking at his RYM page in real time. But I do.
Yeah, I also
would
noticed
like
Kevin Abstract had like a feature on Dylan Brady's first album, which is kind of like a weird.
That is weird.
Like, yeah. I actually remember listening to that album when it came out, and I fucking hated it so much that like I wouldn't listen to Dylan Brady's stuff until a lot later, and then I realized, oh wait, this is actually good.
When was that? When did that album come out? Because I've heard some of his solo stuff.
Like, I think his first album came out like
2015. That was a long time.
Yeah, like this was back when he was like trying to sound like Travis Scott.
Oh, yeah. It was like alt R&B trap.
And like I fucking hated Travis Scott back then.
It's true. I do remember.
I mostly just begrudgingly tolerate him now.
I've only heard the Dylan Brady Peace and Love EP. which is like cool. It's like nothing crazy.
I mean, I think like I'm glad that Dylan Brady is like doing like off to bigger and better things, and he's got his own sound now. Because like that early tape was just Travis Scott worship.
Right. Well, you have to figure when it comes to like people like, I guess like 100 Gex, they've been inspired by so many different things, right? So when they were first probably coming up years ago, they were inspired by a lot of, mid 2010s like trap stuff probably, versus like as it got later in the decade and like rap kept evolving and experimenting in the underground, like of course them being at the forefront of it and with pop music and a lot of other genres, but like they were definitely taking those like inspirations and then like forming a new sound with it, versus like you just said, the worship of a Travis Scott or I don't know, like Young Thug, Future, people that were like really like trendsetters in the earlier part of the decade.
The podcast's official position on Travis Scott is neutral, bordering on positive. It took a while to get to that point.
It's true.
It took a lot of Slim K slowdowns to get me to this.
My opinion on Travis Scott is I think he's good as a feature artist. I still think that he's just not interesting enough as a solo artist to justify listening to a full album of his.
I feel like that's
not even rodeo. Not even rodeo.
I feel like that's the opposite of a lot of people's take, because his features to me are like kind of hit or miss.
It depends on the feature. Like he has one feature on that Metro Boom. I think it was a Metro.
It was the one where he sounds like 808s.
Yeah, and that's like one of the best songs ever out of nowhere. Like
it's a great song.
Like where the fuck did that come from?
Like I guess I just think that he's like good mostly just for hooks, but he just has nothing to say in terms of verses. So just give me the hooks. Like I don't want to hear anything else from him.
I mean,
just be a DJ Khaled type figure. Get some beats together. Get some features together. Don't actually rap on your own stuff.
Patrick, I will say you kind of shattered my brain when you said that. I didn't know that he produced Lens. I knew he was on it, like on one of the versions. I didn't know he produced that beat. I thought that was just like, I don't know. I thought it was either Frank or.
Credits are always very sketchy, so I would not trust that. When
I feel like half the time I feel like half the time when there's a Travis Scott like production credit, it's really just him telling the actual producer, "Hey, can you like turn up the 808s to make it bang harder?"
Someone on Twitter said that someone said that Travis Scott, well, I think it was like in a review I saw on YouTube, but it was like someone said that Travis Scott, when he produces tracks, just adds a darkness filter to it, and that's like his aesthetic. He doesn't actually.
Can you just make it sound more hype?
I am very much a fan of Travis Scott, but I find all of the jokes very amusing.
If you have those old-timey dials that will like turn like a color one way or another, you can turn it to like sepia for Lana Del Rey, and then you can turn it like a little darker for Travis Scott. And like you turn it all the way dark.
You can turn it to golden hour sunsets for Lana Del Rey. Have you heard the poetry album?
Yeah, I like it.
Yeah, I think it's pretty good.
I have to listen to it.
It's a Lana ASMR album.
I mean,
I don't know if that's a good thing or not.
I was inclined to like Jack Antonoff doing these background instrumentals for this anyway, and I've also like been listening to first of all, again, English major. Second of all, I've listened to like way more indulgent rock poetry in my life. I mean, I fucking hate Jim Morrison. Jim Morrison was a hack, but I also have listened to like Lee Ronaldo poetry albums before. So this is not the most indulgent poetry I've heard. Her poetry is not bad. Most of the time. Like, she has some cringe lines, but, I mean, that's the essence of her lyrics, too. I think that actually kind of adds an authenticity to it. If it was, like, all proper and austere, it would just be boring. So, I think it fits the instrumentals really well. I think again, as some people have said, the worst thing about it is that the sound quality isn't great sometimes. Like
clearly recording it on her iPhone.
Right, and I don't know if that was an aesthetic choice to be like, this is why it's so modern. I'm going to put the iPhone in the middle of my apartment, put it on my coffee table, or if it was like just out of necessity, because some of it was recorded professionally, some of it wasn't, which is what it sounds like. But it's better than people are giving it credit for. I knew people were going to shit on it anyway. Like, she did herself no favors, as she always does, by saying some dumb shit in an interview. But
as is tradition.
Yeah. Like clockwork, just like a Kanye album rollout. She's going
Definitely looking forward to Chemtrails Over the Country Club, which is either the best or worst album title of the year.
I'm going to lean towards best.
Yeah, probably some of both. They're a little bit of A, a little bit of B.
A little bit of column A, a little bit of column B there. But I'm excited for it. Is that Antonov production again? Or?
Yeah.
All right, yeah, I'm hyped.
I think Patrick and Jack Antonoff have a very similar relationship to Patrick and Travis Scott because Jack Antonoff has produced many Taylor Swift things, but he's also done other things. So I feel like Patrick is leans positive, but he can't go all the way because he has to acknowledge that he's.
I'm fully on like the Jack Antonoff hype train. Like whatever he's producing, I'll listen to it.
I'm about 90% there. Like honestly, like the Plugged album's really good. They're two of my favorite songs he's ever done on there. The Lord and Carly Rae songs. The Lord song, "Don't Take the Money" on there might just be my favorite Lord song. Like it's a really beautiful song.
It's a really good song.
Yeah.
Really good song. Yeah.
So makes me wish that they would like. Did he do Melodrama too, or no?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, he did. He did most of it.
I like
I think.
Melodrama a lot more every time I hear it. Like I have that at like a 7. It's probably an 8. That's a really good album.
It's a really, really good record. I think it's another one that like aged well, which came out the same year as These Saturations, like, you know, to relate that. But
I'm gonna just to close our previous discussion. I'm mostly on the Antonov train, but I'll never forgive him for or to Unforgivable Sins. So I'm never fully 100% co-signing, but I'll check for pretty much everything he does. Fun is just as bad as Taylor Swift, by the way. Fun is god awful.
Fun is worse than Taylor Swift.
Fun is just as bad as Taylor Swift.
Fun's really bad. We can agree Fun is really bad.
Moving on to, so I guess anything else on Saturation 3? I mean, I don't know. Like I would say it's the second best. 2 is my favorite. So I guess we should say what is our favorites before we move on to anything.
So my favorite on this is either Boogie or Sister Nation.
Boogie's Sister Team or Bleach.
Bleach is my favorite, but overall, Sister Nation's incredible. Like the verse where, and I'm bad and I'm forgetting who did the verse, but the verse where he's like, oh, like I was dealing with, I forget what verse it was, but one of the members is doing a verse and it's something about like, there's a pause in the middle of it, like a detour where he's like, they took me off the meds, like they thought that would help, or vice versa. They put me on the meds, they thought that would help.
That sounds like Matt, I want to say. Or
it was like he was having a mental breakdown. He was like, oh, they put me on the meds.
The mood stabilizers line?
That was Joba.
Yeah.
Oh, Joba, yeah.
See, this is why it sucks having so many members in your group, because I can't remember your impactful verses.
I get Joba and Merlin mixed up sometimes, I would say. They're the two that I get mixed up.
I think Joba is very underrated in terms of his presence. Like, I know a lot of people really fucking hate him for some reason. Like, I get that he can be, like, kind of, like, over the top, but I think he's probably the most versatile member of the group.
Mm-hmm.
I like him on the Trilogy. I did not like him on... I thought there was too much of him on Iridescence. He was one of the things that really irritated me on Iridescence. When we get to that. When I said favorite, by the way, I meant the favorite of the Trilogy before we get to really quick the drafts.
The favorite of the Trilogy is 2 for me.
2.
Yeah, I think we're all 2 on this one.
Right. So yeah, 2, 3, then 1. So
I think 2. I think out of the 3, I think 2 in 10, 15 years will be like their classic record.
I would agree. As far as the draft, so they put out a really cool box set that I wish I was able to get, but
Yeah, I have the box set with me.
Wow, I'm surprised you were able to cop that.
Yeah, it's got like a Ramil trading card and a DVD of the making of Saturation, which is also cool.
Yeah, I saw the DVD. It was up on Daily Motion for a while. It was on one of the streaming sites for a while. I don't know if it still is, but it was a cool... I watched some of it. I didn't watch all of it. It was a cool watch. Mainly, is Scraps on there or just drafts? Because there are two...
It's drafts. I don't know what Scraps is, if that's a bootleg, but yeah, it came with the draft CD.
Yeah, I think the Scraps is just like a mix of stuff that ended up on drafts. Because it has Lamb extended on there. That goes 7 minutes. But
no, that's on the drafts.
Right,
it's
but like... It's better because it goes 9. So I think that Scraps is just like a bootleg of stuff that ended up on drafts.
Okay.
Drafts has, okay, the two things I want to focus on with Drafts are the first track and the Lamb demo. The first track is one of their ballads. It's called Back to You, I believe, and it's fucking gorgeous. It's one of their very best ballads. It's a really great way to lead it off. And Lamb, it says it's a demo. It's nearly 10 minutes long. It's one of their most expansive songs. I can't say enough good stuff. It's a top 5 song of theirs for me. I don't know how it didn't end up on, like, this version didn't end up on a proper project. It's fucking awesome. And there's also one song on here that has something that sounds like the best Eminem verse in 15 years. I think it's on a Matt.
Oh, that's Joba. That's Joba. I know which one you're talking about.
I want to get Joba and Matt mixed up. But, yeah, I forget what track that is.
Yeah.
That track is good.
I think it's like
this
track
is really cool. No, go ahead.
Yeah, like that and the extended version of Lamb are my 2 favorite tracks from that Drafts. And, like, really, that... Like, it's a testament to how good they were in this period that just an album of their thrown away demos sounds like it could just be Saturation 4.
Yeah, if you haven't heard this, I highly recommend it. I don't know if it doesn't have a standalone page on RYM, so you can only hear, like, but if you look it up on any of the usual places, you can find it very easily. It's worth checking out. So after this, they went on tour. Then there was some unpleasantness. Came out basically. Well, as far as fans, they went on tour. They didn't cancel. I think they had all their dates. Is this when you saw them on this tour?
So I saw them twice. Once was around the time right before Saturation 2 came out, and the second time I saw them, like, so the first one was like in a small club,
right,
which was just before they got really huge, so it was still like an intimate show, and it was incredible. The second show was, I think, right after Saturation 3 came out. It was the same year, and they were playing a little bit of the bigger club, but, like, it still kind of felt very small. And then I think they came around a third time, but I didn't go because this one was, like, in, like, a huge, like, I think it was in the Seahawks Stadium. Like, they have, like, the Washington Mutual Theater. And so I didn't go to that one because, like, things just got cut, like, too big, and, like, I didn't feel like...
Right.
Which I think kind of, like... I think illustrates, like, kind of my relationship with the band going into 2018.
Well, because they have like 3 signed. They signed the deal after 3.
Yeah, RCA.
They signed the deal, and they announced an album was originally going to be called Team Effort, I believe, but then it was announced it was going to be called Puppy. And they did a big tour. That was it. And then they came out with the first single, Ready for War, which I remember being really good.
The single never came out. That was just like a leak, and they performed it live, but it never came out officially.
Okay. Because, well, I heard the single a few days before the news, which was first that at first Ameer wasn't kicked out of the group, and then he was. Like, originally it seemed like they were kind of soft pedaling it, and then it was like they couldn't.
From what I hear, what happened was Ameer had left. Basically, they realized that, like, he couldn't stay, so he left. And he also, when he left, admitted that he had set Dom's friend up to get robbed. And that really fucked things up.
Yeah.
Like, even more so than the accusations of, like, being a sex pest.
Neither of those things are good.
Yeah. No. Although they do track with everything Ameer has said about himself in his lyrics. Like, this is, again, like, since I seem to keep dropping in current events into this conversation, just like the whole Mark Kozlak thing shouldn't surprise anything, the Ameer stuff shouldn't have really surprised anything either, based upon what we know about him just from his music. Like, he was always talking about what a toxic person he was and the situation he came from and how he was trying to change, but he wasn't sure if he could.
Right.
Like, this is not a big surprise. Just like a guy who writes 15-minute songs that include lines about how good his semen tastes, it shouldn't be surprising that it turns out that he's a sad old rock star who tries to manipulate. I don't want to get into it, but again, it shouldn't have been a surprise, is what I'm saying.
It turns out that a guy who writes 30-minute songs about his hotel breakfast is kind of a narcissist.
I just want to say real quick, shout out to Travis for his incredible post in that thread. Honestly, made reading the rest of that garbage worth it. It was honestly a masterpiece.
I don't want to go too far into it because if you don't know what we're talking about, it will be an intro on a future episode of this podcast. So
Yeah.
That's why I don't want to go too far into it. But yeah, so Ameer's out of the group. It's completely.
Yeah, and this is like right after they signed that RCA deal, which was like something crazy, like 6 albums in 3 years or something.
6 albums in 3 years, which I don't know if they started being allowed to add solo to that. Or
yeah, they were allowed to. I know that Kevin's solo album counted towards the contract.
Yeah, and that's.
But yeah, that would have been difficult to fulfill. Like even if things were running smoothly, and this whole Ameer thing totally took a wrench to Kevin's general like strategy. Like he had almost like a RZA 5-year plan for the group, and this completely destroyed all that.
Yeah.
Yeah, because so they pretty much scrambled, and there was a handful of singles that came out with a theme of a year and a name. It was 1990. I'm gonna have to look them up in my foo bar here.
Yeah.
1997 Diana, 1998 Truman, and 1999 Wildfire.
And these are all basically tracks from like the Puppy team effort sessions that they just removed Ameer's verses from, and which is why they're so good.
Yeah, Diana didn't do anything for me. Diana's kind of obnoxious, but Truman's great. Out of the three,
like the first 2, I think are like their saturation tier, in my opinion.
Yeah, Truman, I think, is as good as anything on 2 or 3, and Wildfire is very good too. So if you haven't heard these,
this like Ready for War, like all the tracks that kind of leaked from those sessions, I really think whatever that album could have been had Ameer not left would have been just as good.
Well, if you seek through your soul or look through Reddit or any of the usual places, you can find a bootleg that's labeled Puppy. I'm looking at it right now. It's 11 tracks. It starts with Ready for War. A lot of these are live tracks, poor quality bootlegs. I don't know how they decided on the track sequence. It's not like a Yandi situation where there's a lot of finished stuff out there and people picked and shoot, decided to try and come up with the best version of it. This seems like it was kind of just assembled why can't I talk tonight? Out of what was available. So I think there might have just been 11 tracks available, and this is what you get. It shows that there were the basic elements here to make a great follow-up to Saturation 3, to the trilogy.
Mm-hmm.
But they were clearly just in the starting stages. They just gotten off tour, and they never actually got to start forming it. Like, as a project, it's interesting to hear. I wouldn't think of it as a whole album. So I don't think it should be considered as such. Ready for War is a great track. I think that you could certainly read a lot into Ameer's verse. If you want to look up the lyrics to that, there's certainly... also, there's a line of his on Milk about there are some women who know some things, which is very interesting. Anyway. So, I mean, you could probably read a lot into a lot of the lyrics on their next album, where they ended up coming out with Iridescence, which sucks. It's not good.
So my opinion on Iridescence is it's a very frustrating album because I feel like it's an album that's almost good, but isn't quite good. Like, I can see, it kind of reminds me of, like, with Ye, where it feels like if they had just given this, like, a little bit more time to cook, I feel like they could have had something great, but...
Interesting comparison. Yeah.
Because I know, like, a big part of this album's creation, like, formation is that after the whole Ameer thing, they were really shell-shocked, and they just decided to book some studio time in Abbey Road Studios and just made an entire album in, like, a couple days. It definitely sounds like it was made in a couple days.
Yeah.
It's got a lot of ideas. Okay, well, first of all, what really hurt this album for me is it dropped the exact same day as I believe it was the Final Mile album, Budding Ornithologists, and Lupe Fiasco Drogas Wave. So there was a lot of music I was really looking forward to that dropped that day that demanded a lot of my attention, and this kind of came at the end of that. And I'm like, well, this will probably be good. I mean, the singles were, like, I wasn't crazy about the year-themed singles that I just
I think another thing that kind of hurts is, like, the single they dropped for this, Jover, ended up being, like, by far the best song on the album.
It's a really good
song. And that's always very disappointing when the single ends up being better than the deep cuts.
Yeah.
Well, I wasn't aware that was even a single, so I was actually spared that. That would have made me even more disappointed. And when I heard it after hearing the other albums, which were great, so it set unrealistically high expectations. And I listened to it, and it was fine, but it just couldn't seem to decide what it wanted to be. And part of it kind of reminded me of, well, now I'm thinking about this. Did this come out before that A$AP Rocky Testing record?
No, it came out after.
Okay, because that's probably what it reminded me of at the time too. Because now thinking about it is what it reminds me of.
That's another.
I don't think it's quite as bad as testing.
No,
like I wouldn't go that far.
I mean, testing's better than it, but that's besides the point.
Yeah, I think testing's better than it too. There's nothing on here as good as the Frank Ocean song on testing.
Hell no.
I don't know about that. I think like there's really only a handful of tracks where everything comes together for me on this, but I do think like almost every track I think has some good ideas there. It's just not constructed well, like as songs.
I would agree with that, but I'd say that almost every track has good ideas. Not every track. There are one or two tracks that have no good ideas.
I mean, something about him is the worst song they've ever recorded. Yeah. It's not even a question.
By far. Thug Life is terrible too.
I like Thug Life.
See, now you're wrong. Thug Life is, I mean, I guess it's because I'm like a Bleach stan, but that's also.
Oh wait, no, I'm thinking of something else. Let me look at the track list. I'm thinking of something else.
Thug Life is like there. Oh, I mean, you didn't like it really that much in your original review, so.
No, I'm thinking of something on the back end of the album. Thug Life is in the early part of the album.
Yeah, Thug Life is the second.
Are you thinking of San Marcos?
Yes. I think that's one.
I think that one is okay. Like I don't dislike it.
My Rocky comparison to testing is like I feel like half of this album is trying to have like with all the ideas, it's trying to be like an avant-garde, like what Rocky would do. Is like I'm gonna make Atrocity Exhibition. I'm going to have stuff that has like a bunch of beat changes. I'm going to have stuff with a lot of electronic influences.
I mean, what it really sounds like to me is Big Fish Theory. Like they heard Big Fish Theory and were like, we can do this. They also heard Veteran, and they were like, yeah, we can do this.
And in some parts I hear that. In some parts I also hear, and this is probably me hearing something that I heard afterwards and retrofitting it to it, Injury Reserve.
Yeah. Like, it feels like they were listening to, like, it's kind of got the same feel of, like, a lot of cutting-edge UK club sounds and trying to fit that into, like, a hip-hop context. Like, again, I think they're really good ideas here. I actually think, in terms of production, this is one of the best produced albums in their discography. It's just that the songwriting and the chemistry is just not there.
I don't think it's one of the best produced. I think there are a lot of ideas. I think some of them are good, but I think there's just a lot of them. I think it's because they didn't write songs, because they rushed everything, so they just threw a bunch of shit together. I think Jover is the one time it actually really works. I think there are a few better attempts on the back end.
It's an incredible interruption in the pod right there.
I'm sorry, I live in a noisy neighborhood.
No, you're fine.
I think really, like, even more than just Ameer leaving and, like, kind of fucking up the chemistry of the group, I think the thing that really separates pre and post saturation Brockhampton is that I think Kevin just forgot how to write songs.
Well, he certainly didn't forget how to use that MIA voice filter.
Oh my god. Yeah, and another thing I need to fucking talk about is after saturation, like Kevin, I'm sorry, but Kevin fell off. It's sad, but like every track here, he's just doing that shitty MIA impression. Every track. He
was like used to be the most exciting part of their songs, and then he was like
it's just sad because now like he's I think consistently the weakest member on each track. He just sounds so burnt out. Like he doesn't even sound like he wants to be on the track.
But that goes back to my point of the albums came too quick. You can't like.
But I don't even think it's a matter of the albums coming out too quick. I just feel like after the Ameer thing happened, it just wasn't fun for him anymore.
I mean, no, Brockhampton really, and there are a bunch of groups like this, the internet. I really think, and I said this years ago, I really think the truest thing that Drake ever said was him saying, like, the line in I'm On one where he's like, get it while you're here because all that hype don't feel the same next year. And that was, like, the truest shit for so many of groups that would pop off in this, like, wave for a year and then, like, no one gave a shit about them after, or they fell off really hard, or a combination of both. And I
just think specifically, like there was such a lightning in a bottle energy to what they were doing in saturation, and once Ameer left, like it just stopped being fun.
The hype went down so fast.
It's not just the hype, but just I think for them as artists, like it started out as them just being friends and just making stuff like together in the same house. and it just that fun, innocent vibe is just gone. Well, now it's just work for them.
Yeah, well, that's what I mean. You get a label deal like that, and then you have all these expectations on you, and you got to make 2 albums a fucking year. There's a lot of.
I think they really fucked up thinking they could just keep doing 3 albums a year forever.
They put themselves in a position to fail, but you also can't blame. You can't
Yeah, I don't blame them for not expecting what happened to happen.
Yeah. I agree. I do think though that it is crazy how big they went to how quiet everything got for them.
Which I don't know. Apparently, Ginger did well for them commercially, so good for them.
Yeah, I guess I couldn't tell you. I thought that that single off the Kevin record last year was gonna blow, but it didn't, or at least do well in
apparently Sugar did well commercially.
I really thought Peach was the one. I really thought Peach should have blown up, but oh well.
His solo album didn't really do it for me either. There were 1 or 2 good songs on there. That was Jack Antonoff.
It really felt like a contractual obligation album to me. He just it didn't even seem like he was in the mood to release music. He just dropped stuff because he needed to drop something. Yeah. I will say that off that album, I think the one track that I think is really a keeper is, I think is it Baby Boy? I think that's the one.
I like that song, and I love Peach. I think Peach is still my favorite song from that, because that feels it just feels like a poppy Brockhampton song, like a good one. So, I don't know.
What I feel like was most appealing about Saturation Era, or one of the most appealing things, was that Kevin could just come up with these effortless hooks. Like you were saying about, it felt like it was effortless. It was so well constructed, it felt like it just came out of took no effort, no sweat at all.
And it takes a lot of effort to take 8 members or something and manage to construct tightly written songs with that many pieces.
Right, and Iridescence, you feel like all that effort is on the screen or in your headphones at all times. You see them sweat.
Yeah, with Iridescence and Ginger, it kind of feels okay, yeah, I can definitely tell there are 8 different people writing this.
Yeah. And I think with Iridescence, I think my favorite tracks are I like New Orleans and Thug Life a lot. I like Thug Life a lot. And it's not one of their best songs or anything, but it's a song that I listen to a lot out of this album. Just because it feels like a shorter, not as good, but it feels like a shorter version of kind of what they were doing on Bleach, with the boy band sounds and the very poppy feel and the backing vocals. But yeah, I like Joe Vera is still the best song on here.
Yeah, I'd say that my favorite tracks off this are Javert, Fabric, New Orleans, Thug Life, and I think either Wait or District, one of those.
District's a good song.
District's pretty good. Javert and Honey are my favorites, right in the middle. That's the one piece of good construction is that. And Tape's a good song too, from what I recall. They're right.
Yeah, again, every track, almost every track, I think has individual moments that I really like.
I would agree, but overall, most of them don't cohere for me. What else was I going to say? Oh yeah, and also Where the Cash At is horribly disappointing considering it references an all-time classic song. You don't get to reference that song and come up with a mid-track. So.
Yeah, I think in general, Merlin has been really underutilized lately. I don't know why. But I feel like he deserves more time on tracks than he's given.
Well, yeah, this is a mid-ass album, and I would say again that I can't believe I thought better of it at the time. I think I was just exhausted when I first heard it. I was just inclined to give them the benefit of the doubt, because revisiting it...
I really wanted to love this album.
Yeah, I think I gave it more slack because I wanted it to be better than it was, and revisiting it just gave me a headache for the most part. It throws a lot of shit at the wall, but you can just feel the creative exhaustion all over it, the scrambling to put something out. And
to me, it's kind of a shame that the next album ended up being Ginger, because I know this is intended to be the first of another trilogy, and I feel like if they really took their time on a second album with these ideas, I think it could have been something really good. And instead it just they decided to just make a safer album.
Well, okay, we can move on to Ginger now because this was actually a pleasant surprise for my homework for this because I hated this at first. I hated the shit out of it. And re-listening to it, I don't hate it. I think I had better. First of all, my expectations were in the toilet. I was dreading re-listening to this. I was like, let's just get this over with. And then I learned apparently the intro is bolded. It's like their one post Ameer bolded thing on RYM is no halo. And I re-listened to it, just not wanting to listen to it at all, having knowing what it was about, knowing there weren't really going to be very many hard tracks on it, and knowing what it is very ballad heavy, very mid-tempo, very, very overproduced. For that lane, it's good. A lot of it's good. There's some really good production on here. There are good pop hooks. Kevin is for what he's willing to do at this point, this is a good use of him. He's still pretty low effort on here, but in part, the way the songs are constructed, and that's the important thing, is they're constructing songs again.
Now you see, I kind of don't really agree with that.
There are songs in here that suck. Don't get me wrong. I went from a 3 to a 7 on this, or a 2 to a 7. Honestly, I think it's really more of a 6. I think I was just so surprised by it, but I think that there are a few songs on here that are genuinely great. I think No Halo is really good. I don't know if it deserves to be bolded good, but it's really good. I think the title track is really good. That's the best Kevin song, aside from Peach, I've heard since the trilogy. Ginger is really fucking good, the title track. I think there are boring moments. I think the overall churchy tone of it is unappealing, I would say. The last track is dull as fuck. It's a bad note to end on. But I maybe it's my expectations making it, and the fact that I just wasn't expecting hard verses out of them anymore, because this is a mile away from Saturation in a lot of ways, but they've gotten their knack for melody and hook back that they did not have at all on Iridescence. Mm-hmm. And give me one or two good melodic ideas in the song over 10 ideas thrown at the wall where maybe one or two are interesting, but who cares if you're not going to hear them for more than 5 seconds and something else moves in like that. And Dearly Departed is a great song. That was the one I was referencing way back when I talked about Poison. That's got a 70s guitar vamp feel to it that's very uncommon in their whole discography. So I actually gave this another shot, and it changed my mind quite a bit. So it's not something I pull out all the time, but I think that it's got a lot more songwriting appeal to it than I gave it initial credit for.
So my opinion on Ginger is that it's aight, just aight. And unfortunately, that kind of makes me like it actually less than Iridescence. Because I feel like Iridescence has lower lows, but I also feel like it has higher highs, and it's actually trying to do something different and ambitious. Whereas this one, to me, it just kind of feels like they decided, okay, that didn't work out, so let's just make Saturation, but not as fun and not as good.
Let's make a super sad Saturation. This is a sad album.
Yeah, it is.
It's a sad album, but I feel like they've done good songs that are sad before. It's just, I don't know. It doesn't feel as tightly written to me. It doesn't feel as consistent to me. It just kind of feels like, a solid 6 out of 10 album to me.
It is a 6, but considering that when I first heard it, I thought it was a 2, that's definitely an improvement. So I'm probably coming off more positive than it deserves, because it is morose. It is one note. There are a few tracks that try and be hyped. They don't work because they're exhausted. I feel like that exhaustion comes across in the album. But I don't think it's really trying to do anything, to your point. I feel there were ideas, but they weren't formed because they were rushing it out. Whereas I don't know if this is an exhausted, we give up, so here's what you liked in the past. But
I don't think necessarily like that. I just feel like they just wanted to make something that was in their comfort zone, because they just they weren't in the mood really to be doing something super expansive. They just wanted to put something out there, what they were feeling in the moment, and it just happened to be like that.
I feel like it's, I wouldn't say experimental, but the fact that they went so hard in the pop direction is in its own way a little out of the, I don't know. I guess you can't say them going too poppy is out of their comfort zone, because they were always poppy. That was always they called themselves a fucking boy band. So I
don't know. I just feel like it's just a milder version of what they were doing on Saturation.
Yeah, I kind of.
That.
Yeah.
That's the element. Oh, go ahead.
I was gonna say, I think I agree with Horse on this. I feel like it's a solid, middle of the road record.
But like, if you were to release this like immediately after Saturation 3, it would be like, what is this?
People would have been more harsh.
Yeah.
I think people had like at this point kind of lowered their expectations or just changed like what they were expecting out of the group at this point. Because I've heard people say like, oh no, this is underrated. This is just as good as the Saturation. No, it's not. It's not.
No, I'm not saying. Don't attribute that to me. I am not.
Yeah, no. I'm not saying that, but like people who think that this is like, no, it's just as good as the set. You are lying to yourself. I'm sorry.
Yeah. And there's nothing wrong with. I mean, first of all, there's nothing wrong with like having a take like that. But I just don't. To me, I'll never see it yet.
It's just the craft is not. It's just not as tightly written.
Yeah. And it's just, to me, it's just not interesting. Like, it's perfectly fine music, but that's all it is to me, is fine music. And I have really little use for fine music. I want good music or great music, Right.
Like, I don't say that there are 3 tracks on here I would say are great, are No Halo, Dearly Departed, and the title track. Everything else, I can't really, I'll defend it in terms of it's not as bad, it's fine as opposed to actively terrible. And I must have been in a really bad mood when I first heard this. I thought it was actively terrible. But there's nothing on it that's like when it's not good, it's just in the middle of the road. It doesn't do anything.
Because that's like the thing, as I said before, it's like Iridescence was kind of a mess, but like every track I can think of things that are really memorable to me, like, oh, that's interesting. Even if it's bad, like, oh, that's still kind of interesting that they did that. Whereas, like, outside of a couple tracks, and I'd say my favorites are No Halo and Sugar, I kind of felt like there wasn't too much of it that was really bad or really great either. It just kind of felt like stuff they had done before, but better. Which, to me, like, I would much rather have an album that's bad in a memorable way than an album that's just kind of okay and functional, but I'm going to forget about it, like, a few days later.
I guess you're right in that terms. Like, I'll always like remember "Do What Thou Wilt," like as opposed to like a band. Like compare that to like a J-Rock album, which is technically much better, but I don't remember anything about it. But I'll always remember how bad "Do What Thou Wilt" was. Like, that's like memorably horrible.
That's fair. Compared it to even like These Days, and you're like, I don't remember a single song on These Days.
Like, Do What Thou Wilt is like prime Galaxy brain rap.
We need to do a Do What Thou Wilt episode, I think.
That album was so bad that it put Absol's career in the Bermuda Triangle. Like, he has not released shit since.
No. I retroactively...
Really interesting views on the Bermuda Triangle, by the way. I bet he's written a song about it.
I retroactively like Control System less these days.
I think like Control System had its issues, but I think at the time people kind of assumed, this kind of rough, but I think like he's on the cusp of really great things.
Yeah, and then
like it was just all downhill from there. And I think seeing it as just like the peak of a career instead of like his Section 80, I think brings it down.
Yeah. And Section 80 was better than Control System, probably. But anyway.
No, I disagree with that.
Come on. Control System's good, but it's not. Kendrick has like 5 songs on Section 80 that are better than anything except Book of Soul.
Terrorist Threats is on Control System, isn't it?
Terrorist Threats is a great song, but is it better than ADHD? I don't know about that.
Yes.
All right. Okay.
Like, shit, I'm looking at his discography page. He has literally, like, not released any... He's only released, like, 1 song and, like, 3 or 4 features since releasing Do What Thou Wilt. Yeah.
He was
like he just disappeared.
He was good on the Black Panther soundtrack. That one track with Anderson .Paak is really good. That's what's strange about him is he'll just like release the most dog shit, weird Galaxy Brain times 10 thing that'll make you think this guy's done. He's never gonna put out anything good ever again.
And then he'll like drop something good. Like I blame TD. I feel like they're not good at managing their artists. Especially like when they basically just lock them in the vault for years and years instead of letting them release music. Look at Isaiah Rashad.
Yeah,
what has Isaiah Rashad done?
I blame Ab-Soul being the rap game Joe Rogan and just taking tons of drugs and thinking that makes him enlightened.
Isaiah Rashad hasn't dropped anything since 2016 either. Like literally just 1 song and that's it.
And it was good. He could be elite, and they don't let him drop things. I mean, I know he had like a lot of personal issues as well, but like also
Like at this point, it's been 4 years since that album, and they're not even letting him like release singles or features. Like, what's going on at TDE?
I don't know. At least between,
like, I feel like we could have an entire episode on TDE falling off because they fell the fuck off.
They fell. It's single-handedly Kendrick, and well, I guess is Baby Keem signed to TDE now? I don't know.
No, he's signed to Kendrick.
Oh, okay. Well, that's a smart business move by Kendrick.
It's basically just Kendrick and SZA, and like the rest of them are riding their coattails.
Yeah.
What about Lance Skywalker? Everybody's talking about Lance Skywalker.
The streets are waiting for that next Lance Skywalker album.
God, what that was the first sign.
I think like that was like the sign that like, okay, what is TDE doing? Why are they signing this guy?
God.
Well, speaking of what are you doing, no one could figure out what Brockhampton was doing in 2020, but they dropped there's a bootleg that compiled all of the, well, one of the things they were doing was stealing art without giving credit to people. and for singles, which
it's like, it's really weird, like what they've been doing this year, because it's like I want to say like, oh, maybe like the hype is gone, but they've been like intentionally releasing stuff in such a low-key way. Like it just seems like they're trying to do this for like the hardcore people on like the Brockhampton subreddit and no one else, which is kind of a strange choice. But
I mean,
I think the new songs they're doing they're okay. Like I like them for what they are, which are just like very short, rough, throwaway freestyles. Like it sounds like they're having a bit more fun, like recording music again, which is nice.
It's definitely a lot less downbeat than the stuff on Ginger. The one song I will recommend there's a bootleg on the RYM page called Technical Difficulties. It's 22 tracks long. I didn't listen to all of it. I listened to about half. The only one that really stood out to me, there's nothing bad on here, nothing great, except for one song, Chain On / Hold Me, which is the one that's really fully put together with an absolutely fucking hysterical Jpegmafia feature. Where
that JPEG feature is fire, and like it really cemented to me just thinking about where Brockhampton has gone since Iridescence, and like where Jpegmafia has gone since Veteran. Like I feel like JPEG has kind of made them obsolete. I feel.
I don't think it. Okay. I think it's the same market, but I feel like JPEG makes. I think Injury Reserve are hotter than Brockhampton now, and that's the same kind of market to me.
I mean, I feel like unfortunately, I'm not sure where Injury Reserve, like if they're even gonna still be together.
Well, yeah.
R.I.P. Rugs.
I mean, no, seriously, like it's unfortunate, but.
Listening to All My Heroes Are Cornballs, like the thing that really stood out to me is this is what Iridescence, like this feels like what they were trying to do with Iridescence, like in terms of making like this really weird futuristic pop rap record.
Yeah, I mean, if there was any sort of coherent sort of theme or approach to Iridescence, it was that it was trying to be both futuristic pop rap at some points, and some points is like avant-hard, industrial, weird, UK, whatever. It was supposed to be a balance between the two. It couldn't decide which one it wanted to be. It wanted to have like the weird boy band melodic stuff, like Something About and On It, but it couldn't just make up its fucking mind. I don't know if I see the JPEG comparison necessarily. I mean, I think JPEG's doing slightly different stuff. I mean, I think All My Heroes Are Cornballs is more of a Pharrell tribute than that. That's more of an NERD album with like JPEG's sort of sensibilities to it lyrically, and like a almost sarcastic vocal. I mean, I love that album, but I'm surprised that it's so highly thought of, because in terms of like a vocal performance, that's like makes Tyler on Igor look technically proficient. Like I'm surprised there aren't more complaints about JPEG singing.
I think he's like a pretty solid singer compared to a lot of rappers who try to sing.
I think but JPEG though, the way he sings and does stuff, I think is deliberately off-putting sometimes.
It's like sarcastic. It's like a sarcastic.
Yeah, it's very, and I love the album, so I'm not discrediting him. But what I mean is, it's very like it took me a few listens to get used to, and I preferred like the quote-unquote harder shit on that album when I first heard it. I still think Jesus Forgive Me is the best track on that record. I mean, Free the Frail too.
The rest of it.
Yeah,
you don't want to say the rest of the time.
Yeah. He's a thought. Yeah. No, I
just said earlier in the episode that I like boys.
You do. I am a thought, and Patrick likes boys. That's where we're going.
That's the takeaway from the episode.
That's the title. I'm putting that as the episode title. Yeah, I don't know. I think with JPEG though, I think it's less melodic and more kind of like Patrick said, sarcastic and. I feel
like as the years have gone on, he's gotten more and more melodic with his stuff in terms of like putting that pop appeal into his music. Because like the stuff he released, like his early records, like
this year his stuff is melodic. Like you can hear, like
I feel like even on Cornballs, I feel like he really decided to go and lean more into a pop direction. Like Veteran, like is not that melodic.
No.
And the Black Ben Carson record is super not melodic. It's just entirely
abrasive.
Just like
Black Ben Carson's abrasive.
Yeah, like that album is like it's kind of hard to listen to at points because it's just 90 minutes of just super angry shit.
I think that album's funny though. Like the fucking song titles are funny. Like
it's like
good punchlines on there. It's angry, but it's like dark comedy.
Like I think one of his like best aspects is that he knows not to take things too seriously. Like, so there's always, like, a lot of, like, humor to it.
Oh, yeah, no, JPEG's sense of humor is one of the best in the rap game. For sure.
Well, which I think keeps it from feeling like he's trying too hard, like a lot of the Death Grips clones that came out. We were just very consciously trying to jack Death Grip steez. I feel like JPEG has always had a very distinct personality and sound that's different from that.
I guess we'd have to consult our handy, the Reddit flowchart of where to go with alternative rap. If I'm making the right comparison here. But I never really made the connection between JPEG and Death Grips. I guess there's like a spillover in the fan bases, but I don't see how you get from one to the other. They don't really sound anything alike. I mean, I guess like the early stuff, like Communist Slow Jams and Black Ben Carson. I guess that has more.
Like even those, I don't think. No,
I don't.
That. Like he's more indebted to like cloud rap.
Yeah, really. I think JPEG listened to a lot of Lil B, and that's just a guess. I have no clue, but to me, I can hear some of that in like Veteran too.
Well. JPEG's definitely going more interesting. Like that is interesting that he did the track. I don't know when it's from, but I mean they released.
I think it was made pretty recently.
It's interesting that they did it together because it does. I mean, I don't know if I feel like JPEG is taking Brockhampton's place when
I just know like for me personally, I feel like he's kind of taken up that spot in terms of like when I want to listen to this kind of left of center but still melodic type of rap. I feel like he's doing it for me in the same way that Brockhampton was back in 2017.
So I guess right now we kind of landed on where do we think Brockhampton goes from here? Like, what is their legacy? Like, obviously, you've all agreed that Saturation 2 is their peak. Did they ever have anything? Did they have another one in them? I personally don't think
I personally feel like that lightning in a bottle is gone. I don't want to say never, but like, I don't see it happening, but I'd like to be wrong. You know, I'm still gonna check out their stuff. Whenever their next album drops, I'm still gonna check it out.
Yeah.
Like I know they said like that they have like a set number of albums that they like to release, and then they'll just call it quits. And I think Kevin will probably go to like directing movies or fashion or something because it doesn't really seem like his heart is into music anymore.
Well, every rapper says that. Every rapper says they're going to do one more album and they quit, and then they're going to have a fashion line or go into movies. But I do kind of see that with Brockhampton. It's kind of worn it out, and I guess you could say that their career is living off borrowed time, much like us. We are living off borrowed time, and we will see you next week. Our outro music is Stagnated Pace by Can Kick. Good week.
It ain't gonna never stop. 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 It ain't gonna never stop.
But when the time is right, perhaps the greatest revelation of all time will dawn upon us.